administrators and you particularly, Chair, for the many months together, navigating as two newbies essentially through a difficult period. But I wish particularly the community of the city of Whittlesea every best wish for its health and safety and prosperity, and also to my colleagues at Council and the teams for your tremendous professional support over this time. Thank you very much for the opportunity to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carboni. Administrators, if you have a conflict of interest in any item on the notice paper, you may verbally disclose the type and nature of the interest now, but you must make a declaration immediately before consideration of the matter in question. Administrators, are there any items for which you have a conflict of interest? Administrator
Yes, Chair.
Bilson?
Chair, I have a conflicting personal interest in item 6.5.1, which the agenda shows deals with the management and operation of the Mill Park Leisure Centre and the Whittlesea Swim Centre. I'm a director on a board of an unrelated organisation alongside the CEO of one of the organisations that have made a submission for the management and operation of these council facilities. Therefore, seek the consent of the council to be exempt vote on
Bilson. I move that Administrator Bilson be exempted from voting on item 6.5.1 due to a conflicting personal interest for the reasons outlined by the Administrator. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. I'll now put the item to a vote, noting that motion carried.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Administrators, I seek a motion to confirm the minutes of the following preceding meeting held on the 1st of September 2020 and the additional council meeting held on the 7th of September 2020. Could I have a mover?
Yes, Chair.
Administrator Duncan, and a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. I'll now put the matter to a vote. All those in favour of confirming the minutes? The motion is carried. Manager Governance, are there any questions from the public?
Yes, Chair. There's one question from a member of the public which relates to the issue of local unemployment within our municipality due to the COVID-19.
And if I could ask the Acting Chief Executive Officer to respond. The question is from Nick Brain of Epping, and he has asked the following question. Council at its September meeting acknowledged local employment was publicly described estimated surplus. Will Council now consider abandoning its focus on running a balanced budget and use its 2020-21 budget to prioritise measures that will promote an ambitious local jobs strategy? Acting Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Chair, and I thank Mr. Brain for such a considered question. In framing the 2021 budget in May and June of this year, the qualification was signalled in the papers very much that we would need to make material revisions to the budget by mid-year, and that's to account for changing social and economic circumstances facing the community, and as much all about increasing our knowledge of the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic that are affecting our community as they arise, whilst we can still deliver with our budget key essential services and facilities for the community. The full flow-on effects of, and impacts on the community in the longer term, from the point of view of economic revitalisation and the opportunities for growing labour and labour opportunities, are very much a core preoccupation of all three levels of government, and particularly, no doubt, will feature large in the delivery of tonight's federal budget. Those signals where local government can play its part alongside the federal governments and state governments in this space. But over the last 6 months, Council has been supporting our community in a number of ways in regard to the use of our budget and its move towards a response. And in doing so, we've partnered with the state government to create over 264 full-time equivalent positions through its working administrators, you've clearly indicated and will do so in I understand, the 6-month report that you will present today. A key priority for you all is just strategic leadership and advocacy, and economic development central to that pillar which you govern in leadership to support. As to the mid-year budget review, this will be undertaken by January of 2 more quarters of economic data, and this I reiterate my thanks to Mr. Brain for the people result with its budget through you administrators. Thank you, Chair.
Of the administrators. Bilson.
Thank you, Chair. I move that the petition be received and that the Chief Executive Officer arrange for officers to meet with the petitioners to discuss their concerns regarding parking in their court.
Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. I'll now put that matter to a vote. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Administrators, I note that this is our first meeting operating under the governance rules which were adopted at the 1st of September Council meeting and accordingly we will now move through the agenda. Item 6.1.1, COVID-19 update on key issues October 2020 and I'll ask the Acting CEO to provide an update to both the Council and the community in relation to COVID-19 and our response. Thank you, Acting CEO.
And thank you for the opportunity to provide an update. The City of Whittlesea had reported 141 active cases of COVID-19 and this number reduced over the period of September to 8 at the 30th of September, and as at today we stand at 5 current cases. The City of Whittlesea is ranked 14th in the state in terms of active cases, even with our 5. With 48 active cases. In terms of the community impact survey at the high level, we were very pleased to have already had 623 responses to this survey. And the results do, we believe, provide an accurate picture and a good cross-section of what's happening in our community, and particularly how this is playing out in the area of mental health for many of our residents. There's very little surprise that many in the survey said the pandemic has had a negative effect on their social life, up to 88%, indicating that that was a dominant feature for them and added to that sense of feeling. But interestingly, 2 in 3 people said that the pandemic has impacted their mental health, which is quite a large health workforce partners in the community. And we share these on our website. But we received nearly 300 survey responses from a diverse range of industry sectors, including hospitality, public health, businesses in manufacturing, the professional sector and the construction sector. 92% of the businesses were from accommodation and food services who responded, 37% of them from retail. The industries hardest hit are clearly in the health and beauty area, which represents one in 5. We do know that 91% of businesses indicated they've been adversely affected, not mildly affected. Due to the pandemic that left them quite financially vulnerable. In response, councils provided 16 sports clubs coming up ahead. Causing stress on parents in turn. But we are looking forward to the signs of opening up more of our public facilities as a release in the coming weeks and months. Chair, I think that provides, more detail is provided in the report submitted to Council today, which will form part of the minutes and reporting back to the community. But I hope as a snapshot and an overview of the intelligence building from our community that is of assistance. Thank you, Chair.
My apologies. Acting CEO, I would like to ask community and business surveys. You gave an overview of, particularly in relation to the community surveys, we've had over 600 responses, and already in respect of the business survey, we've had over 300 responses. And you highlighted some particular emerging issues, whether it's mental health or financial.
Council to gather data about where it can be effective in managing and supporting our community in through the pandemic.
In relation to things like mental health and family violence. Thank you.
Most useful. Thank you.
Would the seconder, or are there any further questions?
Yes, Chair, through you to the Acting Chief Executive Officer. I'm aware that our community grant support program closed on the 18th of September, and I'm just wondering if you can advise us where we're up to at the moment in the assessment process of those grant requests.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan, for the question. And as you may be aware, the Community Support Grant Program has funds of $80,000 to back it from Council's allocation. And the fund is used to provide $2,000 assistance grants to community groups to enable them and help them to reconnect. We're assessing at Council some 27 applications that have been lodged this week, and we hope to be making some announcements around the successful applicants in the very short next period. There is a potential, and it's worth advising Council, that the entire fund may not be exhausted through this process, and this does provide us an option to provide for considering a second round and other uses of this funds for community group purposes. Thank you, Administrator Duncan.
Thank you. I've just got a follow-up question, which is really to do with the Business Support and Resilience Program grant submission process as well. And I'm just wondering if you can give us a bit of an update on where that is sitting at the moment.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Yes, we've had an overwhelming response to the Business Assistance Grants Program, and it is very pleasing. However, it does also show the very real need out amongst our business community for financial support of this type and nature. On Monday, we actually stopped taking applications due to the high volume that we'd received, and we are now have in train a review of 148 applications. Early indications show just over 80% of our businesses are qualifying for the grants around the criteria that is being shared with them for approval. And obviously we'd be hoping to showcase some of the many fantastic initiatives of our businesses, showing off their innovation and agility and a demonstrated willingness to be resilient and evolving through this particularly challenging economic period.
Thank you.
Thank you, Administrator.
Any further questions? Administrator Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Acting Chief Executive, for that update, and best wishes working through those grants. Thinking about the Business Impact Survey and other insights, do we have a handle at this stage on the number of local businesses that are likely to be permanently closed, and in what sectors and industry segments we see those businesses?
Yeah. Thank you, Administrator Bilson, for the question. And it is somewhat still difficult to assess if businesses have closed purely because of COVID-19 challenges. However, what we do know is that the number of businesses that have closed since the pandemic started in March number almost 85 from our gathering of data. And of this, the great majority, 63, are food-related businesses, with the others being the other 22 being health and wellbeing related businesses that will include that category of health and beauty. Half of these business closures occurred during the second wave of the pandemic, so that is in the July to September quarter. So it's highly likely that our interpretation would indicate that COVID-19 was the major contributor for some significant impact. This helps us, Administrator Bilson, to know where the bigger problem areas are and the repurposing offer around support. And we will know more in the months to come as the recession is deeper and longer as is being flagged.
Chair, may I ask a further question? I've got two more,
Please
if that's
do.
okay.
Please do.
Acting Chief Executive, are you able to update us on the work of the organisation in stimulating outdoor trading and the dining opportunities we've discussed at Council previously?
Yes, Council's already received a number of inquiries, Administrator Wilson, from businesses across the municipality about using footpath, trade or outdoor options, and communication. We're sharing communication with them across various channels, both to increase awareness of that opportunity amongst businesses and owner corporations and centre management setups. So outdoor dining is being actively encouraged as a fillet of an initiative that will really inspire activation and better use of space, as you yourself have flagged quite early in the piece around good examples, both locally and around the world. We're applying for state government funding to help embrace outdoor dining, and there is a provision of about $500,000 that is available to Council on application, which we are proceeding with at this stage.
And Chair, may I add one final one, please? Just mindful of the statistics shared about the sporting clubs and our acting Chief Executive Officer needing to get back into training for the Juventus Old Boys in Doncaster. I hope many of the aspirant athletes that are interested in Council get back to their sports as soon as they can, and you included, sir. But my question relates to a different kind of physical activity. That's the local gyms, exercise and dance studios. They've been forced to close, but could potentially run programs outside if they had access to an appropriate venue. Is there something Council can do to support that, given the restraints on those businesses?
Thank you, Administrator Wilson. Yes, and this goes to the question of reactivating open space in many different ways, as you've foreshadowed. Council is encouraging personal trainers and gym operators and exercise operators to avail themselves of our sports field and public open spaces, but this comes in a form that also acknowledges the rightful use of these spaces and the courteous use of the spaces. It also advises on sports club having priority over certain times and allocations. And we won't be looking to have any fees associated with this activity, but to promote it in its honest form, but also monitor its performance and its usefulness to both businesses and to sporting clubs that share those facilities. Playground equipment and reusing of exercise equipment is also in the public space an area of shared access to those sorts of operators. I wish to look at outdoor programs as well, weather permitting, and they are suffering those restrictions of being closed as an industry that's not mentioned too often, but has such great patronage as we know in Council from young girls and young persons expressing creative endeavour through dance. And that has been a restricted way, other than through telecommuting methods. There is a move to also avail our parks for such services. Business mentoring, these are also small business operators, and if there's anything we could offer in our brigade of advice around mentoring and resources to help those particular businesses, they will be on offer. Administrator Mills.
Thank you, sir, and best luck with your return to the field. Thank you.
Great. Luck will be needed.
Thank you. Being no further questions, could I thank the Acting Chief Executive Officer for the very comprehensive summary of the impact of the pandemic on our communities and businesses, and also for the advice regarding the 3 community and business surveys that have been conducted and some of the results coming out from those surveys. We obviously still have a long way to go, but we remain hopeful that as long as we'll comply with the current lockdown restrictions, we may move to the recovery phase after the 19th of October. I note our recent success, which is noted in this report in relation to the grant submission, that we received $2.5 million of funding for 5 projects from the state government growing, and the Acting Chief Executive Officer also noted that we'll be continuing to actively seek funding from both the federal and the state governments. No doubt we'll be continuing to monitor the impact and adjust our response accordingly, including review of our financial situation. Mr. CEO, if you could please pass on our appreciation to our many frontline staff who have been providing a critical support role during the pandemic. And again, I also acknowledge the tireless efforts of health, aged care and emergency services workers, and also our many community support agencies within the municipality. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those against, the motion is carried. Item 6.1.2, governance arrangements under administrators first 6 months. And I'd like to move this item from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. Are there any questions? There are no questions. The past 6 months have obviously been a very busy period for myself as interim administrator from mid-March, but also for the panel of administrators that commenced from mid-June of this year. And there have been many achievements over that period. We consider ourselves to be a very ambitious group of administrators, and we have frequently said that we want to leave a lasting legacy at the City of Whittlesea. We've decided to prepare a comprehensive public report of our activities every 6 months as a record of our work, and it's very important that our citizens and key stakeholders don't feel disenfranchised, and that we openly communicate on our activities and key priorities going forward. There are many highlights of the past 6 months, and if I could just perhaps reflect on a few of them, and they're provided in great detail in the report. In relation to good governance and decision making, we've clearly been involved in a comprehensive induction program and in weekly administrator briefings to ensure we're well informed on our key responsibilities and on key strategic policy matters. Of course, we've also conducted monthly council meetings, which have unfortunately had to all be held virtually due to COVID-19 restrictions. We have reviewed and endorsed a number of key governance policies, including administrator expenses, privacy and data protection, council delegations, new governance rules, public transparency policy, and today we'll be considering further policies, a review of Council's public question time policy and procedural matters local law. We've also adopted the 2020-21 Council budget and audited accounts, and we're one of the first councils to adopt the annual statement of accounts and performance report. We've reported previously that considerable time and effort has been taken in one of the most important decisions that councils can make, and that is the appointment of their CEO, and that has been the subject of a number of press articles already. And as the Acting Chief Executive Officer noted earlier, we're obviously delighted to welcome Mr. Craig Lloyd to the City of Whittlesea, and he'll be commencing on the 12th of October and has his extensive relevant experience, skills and background. I noted earlier in the meeting our appreciation of the role that our current Acting Chief Executive Officer has contributed to the municipality, and we thank him for the enormous support that he's provided. The administrators have unanimously adopted a strong representational role to ensure that the interest and views of our citizens are well recognised. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has severely restricted our ability to move around the municipality, and we haven't been as accessible to resident ratepayers as we would have liked. We have really, however, actively represented Council on all internal and external advisory committees and webinars. We've met with many local members of Parliament and we've been very active with the media during this period, which is a really key communication tool. We've also strongly advocated on behalf of our communities to both the federal and state governments, and we've noted that we have been quite successful in receiving government grants from a number of key programs. The pandemic has clearly been a major preoccupation of the administrators, alongside the amazing work of our Acting Chief Executive Officer and his team of staff. We've recognised the enormous local impact of this pandemic, and this has resulted in a new hardship policy, significant council funding commitment upwards of $3 million directed to support residents in need and local businesses. Finally, our report details our roadmap for the future and its key elements. And if I could just note the key elements within that: good governance and effective decision making, a high performance organisational culture, customer service and genuine community consultation and engagement, strategic leadership and advocacy. We'll be continuing to report on our activities on a regular basis within the community, meeting residents and visiting organisations and businesses, and generally being more outward focused. Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to this item?
Clear roadmaps for going forward is our customer service and community engagement and consultation process, and I think I can safely speak on behalf of my fellow administrators that this is something we're very much looking forward to doing with our new CEO Craig Lloyd when he comes on board, and the executive team, to develop a very comprehensive and integrated community and engagement plan and framework. And this framework will be the way we move forward and the way we go about things. And we'll also, obviously, in early 21, we will be doing the Reconciliation Action Plan and other key policies and strategies, which I think we're very much, waiting to get our teeth into, and hopefully it's out of this stage 4 pandemic where we can't get amongst the community, as you have said, Chair. That's been difficult for us because we desperately want to come and see the community, talk to the community and meet everybody and get right in amongst it to understand what the issues are and the opportunities are for us. And I think it's evident that our community satisfaction survey dipped over the past 5 years, as have other metropolitan councils. But the administrators, we're looking forward to reversing this trend so that we are known to be an efficient and effective council and responsive to our citizens and everyone in the municipality. So that will be a part of our genuine encouraging of community consultation and discussion with the community to get that satisfaction level as high as we can get it. So that was my only comments I really wanted to make.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. If I could ask or invite the seconder of the motion, Administrator Bilson, to speak to the item.
Oh, thanks, Chair. And in seconding the motion, may I commend you on not only your presentation of the report, but the initiative itself. We have not been required to do this. The 6-month report was something that we've chosen to do because it's the right and accountable thing to do given the task that's been asked of us by the state government and the expectations of the community. And I just wanted to acknowledge your initiative in that respect, Chair, and thank you for that thoughtfulness and that good governance initiative. I also wanted to draw out a little bit on the key priorities that you outlined in the report and make a few further comments, particularly in relation to one part of it, and that's the leadership and advocacy role in our strategic roadmap, but bring it into a particular area of interest to me, development. There's so much going on, and it's really positive, and we all share a view that Whittlesea is not only a place for all, it's actually a great place to live and invest, to grow a family and to pursue people's ambitions, but livelihoods need to be part of that as well. 2/3 of our current citizens leave the municipality for their work somewhere else, and we'd like much more diversified and deeper employment opportunities within our own municipality so that livelihoods are closer to home. And when we look at things like the realisation, the opportunity with the Northwest City deal, particularly BIFT, the Beverage Interchange Freight Transfer Centre, also the Epping Food Innovation Hub, these are very delicious opportunities for our region, and we can assure the citizens of Whittlesea we are up and about advocating our interests and the community's interest in those very key projects. Stimulating employment opportunities and ensuring we're not exclusively or predominantly a dormitory area, but one that can generate and support its own employment and its own livelihood opportunities. And our Acting Chief Executive Officer touched on some of those themes with the ambitious local job strategy in response to the question that was in public question time. Also, the important role of social enterprises, stimulating that activity within our municipality. For purpose, not for profit, and social enterprises can make a very important contribution to the economic vitality and opportunities in the city. They're already doing that, and we'd like to see more of that, and are mindful that we can play a role to facilitate that. And lastly, business activation, uplifting existing businesses, but also attracting new businesses. There's so many great reasons why people should invest in the city of Whittlesea. The infrastructure, the transport linkages, the economic activity that's already here, the fantastic workforce, the access to markets, they're just a few. And we'd like more people to know that this is a great place to invest. That's part of our advocacy, and that's part of our vision for more local livelihoods in Whittlesea. So I commend you, Chair, and the report, and thank you for your leadership in bringing this 6-monthly accountability report to the Council agenda.
Thank you, administrators, for your additional comments. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is unanimously carried. Item 6.1.3, Assemblies of Administrators, 6th of October 2020. Do I have a mover?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. And a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Are there any questions?
Chair, just maybe an observation just for the public audience. This particular item notes and reports on various internal and external advisory committee meetings attended by administrators where officers are also in attendance. So it's an important disclosure and accountability step. And I thank you, Chair, and the officers that support administrators with this role of participating in a number of assemblies.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson, for the clarification of the purpose of this report. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.1.4, Instruments of Appointment and Authorisation for Planning Enforcement Officers. I'm happy to move this item. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Are there any questions?
No.
I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.1.5, Review of Council's Public Question Time Policy. Do I have a mover?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Are there any questions? No.
May I just make a few comments though, Chair, with your agreement?
Certainly. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, at our last council meeting on September 1, the council adopted new governance rules. One part of the rules related to the process for handling public questions at council meetings, and a public question time policy is linked to that process. The public question time policy has been reviewed, and this has led to a number of changes that have been incorporated in the draft that's presented to council today, which I commend to the council to adopt. And of course it references administrators in lieu of councillors. There's also changes that focus on greater clarity to the public about how to submit a question to a scheduled council meeting, and also how a question will be answered. The proposed changes will ensure that the council policy more closely reflects actual council practice in responding to questions received from the community. Chair, it also includes an important provision, and that is where a question is lodged that may, by its nature, ordinarily be ineligible to be asked. It actually invites the manager of governance to exercise his ability or those of his delegate to work with any resident whose question may be disallowed, to revise the question where appropriate, to remove any grounds for disallowing it in the first place, and therefore allowing it to be asked. So that's a very helpful innovation in this version of the policy, and I commend it to the council.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.1.6, Procedural Matters Local Law. I'm happy to move this item from the Chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. I do have just one question for the Acting CEO, and that is whether he could please confirm the value of a penalty unit, which is referred to in the offences section of this local law.
Yes, I have been briefed by the Manager of Governance and would ask him to confirm the amount involved per unit.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Chair, local law penalty unit is set under legislation at $100. So you'll note in the local law that it's often a multiple of a penalty unit, but it's a multiple of the $100.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? So perhaps in moving this item, as mentioned by my colleague Administrator Bilson, and we also noted at the outset of this meeting, we adopted new governance rules last month to regulate the proceedings of council meetings and meetings of delegated committees. And previously the procedures of council meetings and meetings of committees were regulated by council's Procedural Matters Local Law. It's now obviously necessary to repeal the Procedural Matters Local Law and adopt a new local law which only deals with matters that are not covered by the governance rules. The combined effect of the governance rules and this new local law really are to ensure good governance and to regulate proceedings and ensure the orderly, fair and professional conduct at all council meetings and also advisory committee meetings. So the new local law will repeal the Procedural Matters Local Law and also provide clarity on the use of council's common seal and any enforcement required of the governance rules. The adoption of a local law does require public consultation and to be undertaken, and the approval of the local law at today's meeting is for the purpose of commencing the public consultation process and to establish an advisory committee comprised of the panel of administrators to consider any submissions that we might receive from the public on the proposed new local law. The local law will then obviously be presented to council at a later meeting for formal adoption following the public consultation process. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.1.7, request for boundary change of a locality, 182 Green Hills Road, Thomastown. And again, I'm happy to move this item from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. I do have a question through the Acting Chief Executive Officer to the Manager Governance, and that is, could he please outline the specific consultation process which will be undertaken to gauge the views of the 230 properties within the relevant geographic area that are affected by the proposal? That is, how will the survey be distributed and administered given the current lockdown restrictions to ensure that residents are well aware of the proposal? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As you can appreciate, with the current arrangements, it is more challenging. However, in addition to placing a notice on the Council's website and also in a newspaper, which are part of the standard process, we will be sending a personally addressed letter to each of the 230 people in that area, and that will be hand delivered, given the challenges with postal delivery at the moment and the time frame for the consultation process. So a combination of hand delivered, but for those people who are non-resident owners, they will receive notification by post. So it'll be a combination of matters, and people will then, once they have provided feedback, they also have the right to speak to an advisory committee that the Council will be forming today to speak in support of their submission if they wish to do so prior to Council reconsidering the matter, ideally at the December Council meeting.
Thank you, Manager Governance. Are there any further questions? There being no further questions, in moving this item and noting a change to the 12th of November for the closing date of submissions, I note that the renaming proposal for properties 182 and 182W Green Hills Road, Thomastown, has been initiated by the owner of the 182 property, and Council's role is simply to conduct the formal process set out in the naming rules, including consultation processes, hearing and considering submissions. So I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.2.1, authorisation for the commencement of a planning scheme amendment to the application of a public acquisition overlay in the Mernda strategy plan area. Do I have a mover?
Yes, Chair. May I move?
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. And a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Are there any questions?
Yes, Chair. I have a question to the Acting CEO. I note in the report that officers had previous discussions with Major Roads Projects Victoria, Department of Transport, Department of Land, Water, Environment and Planning. Can you briefly outline what their perspective of these plans were, please?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Administrator Duncan. And I will refer the explanation of the processes to the Director of Planning, Partnerships, Planning and Engagement to respond.
Thank you, Acting CEO, and thank you for the question, Administrator Duncan. Through the Chair, initial consultation has been undertaken with those state authorities. They play a crucial role in the process, and that's in assessing the planning scheme amendment, it's in making recommendations to the Minister for Planning, and it's also in ensuring that there's an appropriate ultimate design with the coordination to do with the Plenty Road Upgrade project that adjoins the intersection that would ultimately be created through this amendment. So these parties will naturally remain involved as the amendment proceeds through the relevant steps. Council will continue to work with them, and to date they have not expressed any concerns with the project. Thanks.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions?
Not a question, but perhaps an observation, if I may, Chair. The delivery of the Mernda Sports Hub is a real council flagship project, and it requires appropriate site access from the intersection of Everton Drive and Plenty Road and a road connection. A small tract of additional land is required to complete the Mernda Regional Recreation Reserve. So this report's about seeking authorisation from the Minister for Planning to prepare and exhibit an amendment to the Whittlesea planning scheme to apply a public acquisition overlay on the area of land that's required to enable council to acquire that land and therefore progress this key project. So commend the recommendation to the panel, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.2.2, approval of 80 MacArthur's Lane and 25 Hunters Road, South Morang Development Plan. I'm happy to move this item. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. I do have a question for the Acting Chief Executive Officer to the Director Partnerships Planning and Engagement. In relation to the submissions received for this development plan, I note that there are a considerable number of comments from both supporters of the development plan and several affected residents expressing concern regarding potential traffic volumes, traffic flows and access ways. And I'm wondering if you could provide some overall comments regarding effective traffic management across the whole of the subject site.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Acting CEO. So traffic movement through a new area or a new area to be subdivided is always very carefully considered, given the important role that it plays. And when land is fragmented in ownership or develops over time, the ultimate layout may not be realised immediately. So the Mernda strategy plan in this area envisages a collector road running north-south through the site between Millstrom Way, which is to the north, and a signalised intersection where it adjoins in with Plenty Road and Riverdale Road. And the proposed development plan is consistent with that layout shown in the Mernda strategy plan. There will also be future connections through the land in the southeast, which will improve traffic flow and connectivity. And the road types, the network, the layout, those kind of things that are designed to accommodate traffic volumes have been designed in excess of the likely requirements or the demand that will be generated by the traffic that comes through there. We will look at specific details, calming measures later as part of future subdivision applications. And I think importantly for not only the South Morang residents but also City of Whittlesea residents, the traffic upgrade works that are currently being undertaken for Plenty Road are expected to significantly improve traffic movement and improve travel times in the local area. So those works are expected to be completed by the middle of next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through the Acting CEO to the Director Partnerships Planning and Engagement, this development plan was originally submitted in early 2019 to Council. The plan we are now considering has had a number of revisions since that time to address outstanding matters, so I'm hoping you can just explain what some of those matters or the revisions have been.
Thank you, Administrator.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan, and through you, Chair. So the key changes that, excuse me, thank you, Administrator Duncan, and through you, Chair. The key changes since 2019 relate to amending the location of medium density housing, which is located in the northwest corner. And so that was done to incorporate a perimeter road, which was to respond to a bushfire risk and sloping landform. So it was a site-specific response. There has been the inclusion of a roundabout in that northwest corner location, and also provision of additional access to the adjoining land in the southeastern corner, just to improve that connectivity and access through the site. There's been the removal of some minor components such as tree reserves that were actually shown on adjoining land, and then some associated updates in the text component, if you like, so to the principles within the document itself that provide guidance and management for future development, as well as traffic and environmental conditions through the site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions?
Yes, Chair, I have one.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair, and through the Acting Chief Executive to the Director of Partnerships, Planning and Engagement. Thank you, sir, to you and your team for the comprehensive advice on this. The development plan's been amended, I note, to require an environmental audit to be undertaken to assess the land's condition to ensure it's suitable for residential development and or manage any identified risks. I understand this is linked to former agricultural land now being prepared for residential land. Can you clarify, please, what form this environmental audit will take?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Administrator Bilson. So the Environmental Protection Act outlines the requirements relating to environmental audits. The Section 53X audit mainly applies where there's a proposed new sensitive use, that being residential, for a section of potentially contaminated land. So the advice from the EPA is that it's partially potentially affected, not necessarily the entire site. And so the audit will involve assessing the land's condition, including a site history review, site investigation, sampling program. It could include sampling of soil, water, air or vapour. And the outcome of the audit then is either a certificate where everything's okay, or it's a statement, and the statement's usually issued where there are constraints or works that are needed to bring something into compliance. So that statement will also outline what uses are appropriate for the site and whether there's any that are not. It will outline the conditions to manage the risk for the site if required, and also the nature of the contamination that needs to be removed before a certificate can actually be issued.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you to the Director for the responses to all of our questions. And in moving, could I just note that the 80 MacArthur's Lane and 25 Hunters Road South Morang Development Plan was, as we noted earlier, submitted to Council in early 2019 and encompasses some 34.73 hectares of land for residential purposes. The plan also, importantly, facilitates the transfer of approximately 45 hectares of land to Council to form part of the Quarry Hills Regional Parkland, which is very significant. Would the seconder of the motion like to speak to this item?
If I may, Chair, I just want to add to your closing remarks that I was going to say it's a small step in the project, but a giant leap forward for Quarry Hills Regional Park. But it's very substantial, that extra 45 hectares. And I might note the thoughtfulness and the sensitivity with which the developers propose to shape the interface between the residential development with the Quarry Hills Regional Park. Many positive environmental aspects as well as health and well-being benefits are associated with active and passive leisure and recreational opportunities, and I commend the proponent and the staff for the thoughtfulness with which they've sought to interface the residential area with the Quarry Hills Regional Parkland in that spirit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.2.3, application for multi-lot subdivision, construction of 12 dwellings on a lot, native vegetation removal, including removal of 3 river red gums, and creation of easements and reserve 104 to 110 Shotters Road, Mernda, 719072. Do I have a mover of this item?
Yes, Chair. I move.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. And a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Are there any questions?
Yes, Chair, just one if I may.
Thank you, Administrator.
Through you and the Acting Chief Executive to the Director of Partnerships, Planning and Engagement. I note this application is compliant with the Whittlesea Planning Scheme and the Mernda Township Concept Plan and a Mernda Local Structure Plan, but the development plan has not been prepared. Could you just clarify the reasons for this and the implications for this proposal, please?
Thank you for the question, Administrator, and through you, Chair. So development plans are typically prepared by developers and landowners when land is ready to be developed. And in this area, the land is highly fragmented in ownership, meaning that it's likely going to be developed in kind of more of a piecemeal approach. And that makes things complicated when trying to prepare a development plan because you need to get agreement and buy-in from all of the respective landowners. Having said all of that though, the overlay does allow council to grant a planning permit without an approved development plan, and that's so long as the applications are generally in accordance with the overlay control. And in this case, there's a concept plan included in the overlay control, the development plan overlay. So the concept plan provides that guidance in the absence of a development plan, and the current application is consistent with that concept plan that's listed there, which is also consistent with the Mernda strategy plan and the Mernda local structure plan. Thanks.
Any further questions? No. Would the mover like to speak to this item?
Oh, thanks, Chair. Just briefly, and I'd like to thank the Director of Partnership Planning and Engagement. I imagine most people in growth areas would be familiar with a development plan or a master plan of some scale and dimension, and I fully understand why in this case there isn't one because of the fragmented ownership. But this proposal for the construction of 12 dwellings and a multi-lot subdivision will provide for new dwellings in an area which is well serviced by public transport, educational facilities, shopping and other services, and we do hope a leisure and recreation facility in the not too distant future, Chair. I note there's been no objection to the application, and it's clear from the officer's report that the proposal's been assessed against the Whittlesea planning scheme, including the Mernda Township Concept Plan and the Mernda Local Structure Plan, and it's achieved a very high level of compliance with the intended outcomes of these plans. It's well connected into the subdivision pattern of the neighbourhood, and I particularly note the multiplicity of conditions that have been applied to the planning permit. There's quite a number of them. These include the requirement for the development of a sustainability management plan, a landscape master plan, and native vegetation offsets to compensate for the removal of the native vegetation, and the employment of a consulting arborist to supervise works and minimise the impacts on trees marked for retention. So on that basis, Chair, I commend the recommendation to the panel.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is unanimously carried. Item 6.2.4, application for extension of time for permit for the installation of 40 electronic gaming machines at the Commercial Hotel, 820 Plenty Road, South Morang, and I'm happy to move this item. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second it, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. I do have a few questions through the Acting CEO to the Director, Partnerships, Planning and Engagement, and perhaps if I could ask each question and then get the response from the Director. My first question is, and they're really all about clarification of the sequence of events that have occurred in respect of this particular planning application. My understanding of this matter is that Council originally resolved to refuse this permit in 2017 on the basis of the proposed electronic gaming machines, but not for the proposed extensions or alterations to the hotel, and VCAT subsequently approved the permit, but with separate expiry times for the electronic gaming machines and the development components respectively. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair, that is correct. There was no opposition from Council originally to the extensions and alterations. It was the refusal or the opposition was based on the introduction of the electronic gaming machines. And the appeal that went to VCAT was both against the VCGLR granting a licence as well as against the planning application component. And so VCAT heard the two matters concurrently. And although the licensing application component was refused, VCAT did decide to grant the planning permit, and in doing so included the two separate expiry dates relating to both the development side and then the electronic gaming side.
Thank you, Director. And then in December 2019, Council approved an extension of time for the commencement of the development works for a further 2 years, which took it up until December 2020. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Chair. The extension of time was for the development aspect of the permit, which was already approved. Which was approved back in December in 2019. Yes.
Thank you, Director. So obviously this application is seeking to align the dates for both the development works and the installation and commencement of the operation of the electronic gaming machines, given that the previous approval for development works, there was an extension already for the further 2 years.
That's correct, Chair. The recommendation to extend the gaming machine aspect of the permit for the 2-year period, which I might say is less than what was applied for. The intent behind that is to align the two different expiries to match each other. So yes, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Are there any further questions?
Yeah, I have one, if I may. It's pretty clear, through you to the Acting Chief Executive Officer and on to the Director Partnerships Planning and Engagement. It's pretty clear from the officer's report that there aren't any real basis for refusing this application, and that were we to do so, we could place the municipality at considerable risk of costs and other implications from our actions, and the basis being the precedent that refusing the application, we'd need to see some material change in either the planning controls or land uses or some kind of alteration to the plans, and there's been none of those things. So am I reading that correctly, Director, that it would be a precarious act to oppose it when there's no real basis because there's been no real change? Is that correct?
Through you, Chair, that is correct, Administrator Bilson. Based on the relevant planning considerations for extending the time of a permit, there is just no justification in this instance for refusing to extend the time. I do note in that context, this is the first request for an extension of time which is relevant. There has been no change in circumstance, no change in the proposal since the matter was decided by VCAT. And it's also important to note that whilst this is an extension to the planning permit, the operators still don't have a gaming licence, so they can't actually act on this component of the permit. Thank you.
Thank you for your clarification on all of those questions, Director. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.4.1, outcomes of tree petition investigations, Campus Place, Thomastown. Do I have a mover?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to move that if I may, but can I suggest a slight alteration to recommendation 1? And I think that's now being projected up on the screen for broadcast to those viewing this meeting. And I'd like the recommendation to read, advise the petitioners that Council has no plans to undertake full replacement planting of the entire street with new trees for Campus Place, Thomastown, and will consult residents if Council's annual planting program looks like it may include their neighbourhood at some time in the future.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. I'm happy to second the motion with the alternative recommendation 1. Are there any questions? I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Item 6.5.1, Management and Operation of Mill Park Leisure Centre and Whittlesea Swim Centre Tender Evaluation. Administrator Bilson earlier declared a conflict of interest in this matter, and Council has resolved to excuse him from voting on this item. And Administrator Bilson will accordingly be leaving the meeting for consideration of this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm happy to move this item. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Are there any questions?
No, Chair.
In moving this item, I simply note that we've had a very comprehensive briefing on this item and responses to our previously raised questions. And so accordingly, I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. And Administrator Bilson will now be able to return to the meeting. Administrator Bilson. I note that there are no notices of motion. If any of the administrators have delegate reports to discuss, you're free to do so now. Administrator Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. I think the 6 monthly report you've provided obviously has the fulsome list of activities, including what we've been doing during September, but I did really just want to highlight 2 meetings that I attended, and they were with yourself, one of them, and with Administrator Bilson was the other one, and that was the Whittlesea Reconciliation Group meetings, where we're starting to do the planning process for the next Reconciliation Action Plan. And I think both of them, I missed the first meeting, but the second part of that planning process and the meeting prior to those planning meetings, I think was very, very good. And I commend everybody on the reconciliation group for coming together. And I think we're going to do some fantastic things in that space. I thought the yarns with the elders and with ourselves, as well with the reconciliation group elders, was fantastic and a very good learning for us as we can't get into the community as we have talked about previously. And then a very insightful meeting with the Whittlesea Community Connections group. I think that was very good to hear what work they do and all of the people involved in that organisation. So those are really the 3 I really wanted to highlight, and obviously as closing out the appointment of Craig Lloyd as our new CEO, which took quite a bit of work, and I think we've landed on a very good CEO there, so exciting times ahead. But they're the things I really wanted to highlight from my activities.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Administrator Bilson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Administrator Duncan. I share her enthusiasm for some of the meetings we've jointly participated in, and also with Craig Lloyd's appointment as our Chief Executive Officer. Just quickly, on the 8th of September, the Whittlesea Disability Network meeting was held. I was happy to join the participants there and hear about what our access team is up to, Council's COVID update, and also get an update from Michael Parrymore and Debbie Anderson from the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, as well as Greenbrook Community House programs and workshops, Liz Skitch gave us a great update on what they're doing. September 14, we had the Whittlesea Community Futures Partnership meeting. More than 200, I think it was, local organisations coming together in a collegiate way to make sure we all bring our A game and synchronise our efforts to provide the best support we can for the Whittlesea community that are in need. On the 14th of September, as Administrator Duncan outlined, the Whittlesea Indigenous Yarn was a terrific get-together with the panel, our senior executives and our leading figures in our local Indigenous community, including our reconciliation group, current and past chairs. It was a really worthwhile conversation. 21st of September, Chair, I was happy to represent you at the Mayoral briefing for Localized Suburban Response Units. Professor Ewan Wallace from the Department of Health and Human Services was explaining how across the metropolitan area of Melbourne, local public health units are being established, modelled largely on the Barwon experience in regional Victoria, where they activated an enhanced local community response, where it was far closer to the community to ensure that contact tracing for COVID episodes could be done as close to the community as possible, and that's proven to be a success. So that's coming from regional Victoria to metropolitan Melbourne. And finally, just at the start of this month, October 1, the Metropolitan Waste and Resource Recovery Group, we're working through the state government's plans to create a Victorian Waste Act, mindful that no one has a statutory responsibility to pick up waste at the moment, and that's needing to be clarified, but it also will involve the formation of a new authority and how that intersects with the City of Whittlesea and local government more generally, a work in terms of roadside collection, waste management and resource recovery. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson, and thank you to Administrator Duncan for reminding me that there is a comprehensive attachment on our 6-month report which virtually itemises all of our involvement in internal and external advisory committees and all of the other things that we have participated in. Over the past month, on the 11th of September, I represented Council at the MAV Representative Forum. There were comprehensive updates from the President, the CEO and an overall board update, and also reflections on the strategic plan of the MAV going forward. And then on the 17th of September, Whittlesea Reconciliation Group had the first of their 2 planning sessions, and it was a facilitated session which really, as Administrator Duncan indicated, was really about taking stock of what has occurred and what is the way forward. On the 21st of September, I attended the Whittlesea Community Connections board meeting, and there was an emphasis on consideration of both strategic issues and project updates from right across the organisation, governance issues, risk and insurance review, financial policies and preparation for the AGM and board nominations. And then on the 24th of September, we had the second meeting of the Whittlesea Reconciliation Group, which was the second planning session of that group. And as Administrator Duncan indicated, very exciting in relation to the positive path forward and the energy that has been generated from this whole process. And then on the 29th of September, I attended the annual general meeting of Whittlesea Community Connections, and that was a wonderful opportunity to hear the reflections and the many achievements of that organisation over the past 12 months. And just to note that on the 1st of October, I attended a meeting with all of the chairs of the 4 panels of administrators that are currently in place, and the key purpose of that meeting is simply for us to share information and to update one another in relation to our respective approaches. Administrators, I require a motion to receive and note the delegates' report. Do I have a mover?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Duncan. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to so second, Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. I'll now put the item to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Administrators, I do have an item of urgent business relating to the Council's proposed submission to the State Government on the Yan Yean Road Stage 2 upgrade and environmental effects statement. And I move that it be admitted as an item of urgent business. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair. Happy to second this matter of urgent business.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. I'll now put the item to a vote to admit it as an item of urgent business. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. Administrators, I note that officers have circulated a report and recommendations to us relating to the Council's proposed submission to the State Government, which relates to the Yan Yean Road Stage 2 upgrade and associated environmental effects statement. And these papers will form part of the minutes of this meeting. I move this self-explanatory recommendation as follows, and I'll read it in full, but it's also being projected on the screen now. That Council resolve to 1, note and support the significant investment by the State Government to advance the critically important Yan Yean Road Stage 2 upgrade project. 2, support option C as Council's strong preference for the intersection of Yan Yean Road, Bridge Inn Road intersection. Noting amendments are required to further improve its functionality and reduce impacts on the Doreen River Red Gums, the Doreen Recreational Reserve and local business. 3, authorise officers to prepare a submission to the Advisory Committee outlining Council's strong preference for option C, noting design changes are required. 4, note in the submission that in the event the Planning Minister determines a preference for option B, that Council will require specific matters to be addressed to reduce impacts on current and future land uses as outlined in discussion/preferred position section of this report. And 5, authorise officers to negotiate with key stakeholders as required in the lead up to the public hearing to achieve the best outcomes for the project in the context of Council's position. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair. Happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Administrator Bilson. Are there any questions? There being no questions, I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The motion is carried. That brings us to the end of the meeting and therefore I declare the meeting closed.